Welcome to Sunday. You made it.
Yeah.
It is 11:45, so it's not that big of a deal that you made it. Congrats for getting up at 10:30.
Wait, I'm
We're proud of you.
Catherine.
Oh, okay. I'm Jay. Nice to see you.
Yeah, we're so glad to be
We're
here.
so excited.
Now, right about now, you may be thinking like, oh my gosh, this is really going to be a downer Sunday. Like, a girl's on stage in a wheelchair, and that poor couple, and this is really going to bum me out. And like, I had brunch plans, and they're ruined. The week is ruined. Like, I'm going to be really, really sad leaving here. Or maybe you're the sweet lady in the back, the sweet church lady that, bless her heart, that poor little thing. Oh, bless them, bless them. They are just, it must be so hard. Well, let me assure you.
Get up, girl, get on up. Get on up.
Most definitely
Don't fall.
not be a downer. I pray what you will leave with today is some serious joy in the Lord, not a tinge of sadness. And I can assure you, this is not a bummer. This is not a bummer message in the least. So hold on for a moment, and I'll sit down safely.
Thank you.
Okay.
Don't fall.
Yeah.
That would be a downer. No pun intended. It would be a downer off that
That's
stage.
true. That's true.
bring it
Okay.
in.
Yes.
So, y'all, we're so excited to share with what is now our home church community. We're so pumped. Oh, my gosh.
Yay!
We just moved to Atlanta a year ago,
here.
and we're just figuring out this new city, but Passion has just welcomed us with the biggest open arms. It's been the sweetest, softest landing in this very big transition for our family. So we're so grateful, and probably like most of y'all, our life has been changed by this community, by this movement.
Yeah.
You know, whether it's by conference or the church or the Grove or whatever, being a door holder, our life will never be the same. And so we just give so many thanks to God for intersecting our life and our ministry and our family with Passion and with you today. And we think it's pretty perfect timing, right, as we enter into the Sabbath season as a community, that we've come off of this experience of thinking about the extravagant love of God, creating this extravagant response of worship in our hearts, leading us to this above and beyond sort of journey with a God who is of indescribably more, right? And so we hope today that our story kind of, again, fits in the context of what we've been going through as a community, that we'll put some flesh and bones kind of on these ideas, and then go into the Sabbath time, maybe giving you something to think about in your story a little differently. I love that neuroscientists say a story enlivens the both sides of our brains like almost nothing else in the world. That we get, with our analytical and with our creative part, to hear a story and understand things differently about God and ourselves and our place in this world. So anyway, that's our hope for you today. And that you wouldn't see just this crazy testimony that has nothing to do with your life, but in fact, you would see your own story in our story. Because you know what? This is God's story. God uses all of these things to remind us of what we already know, that He is about giving life to things that should be dead, giving healing to our deepest wounds. So this is your story too, friends.
We like to kind of make a provocative statement that in fact we are all disabled, not just those of us with wheelchairs on the outside of our bodies, because we all got invisible wheelchairs inside happening. So we're actually all disabled because we can't do this life without each other, without Jesus, in my opinion. And the reality is some of us have like this brand of brokenness on the outside, but everybody's got the same story of suffering on the inside. Mark it down. We all got pain. We all got sin. We all got messed up stuff happening. Some of us have some of it on the outside, but all of us got loads, including me, on the inside. So we're all living out the same story. It's only the specifics that are different. Whether it's financial, horrific stuff, emotional, relational, we've all got a lot of hard stories. We're on earth. John 16:33 is true. There is trouble in this world, right? So the question is, what are we going to do with it? So don't think of this as different from your life and your story. This is actually the same. It's just a different version of your stuff.
Good. And Catherine and I are from the South. I'm from Montgomery, Alabama. And wait for it. No, there's no Montgomery. No. Okay. Hi. How are you? Nice to see you. I think we went to high school. No, I'm just kidding. I don't know who that is. I don't live there anymore either. I live in Atlanta now. So, but Katherine is from Athens, Georgia. Maybe there's a few more Athens, Georgia people around here.
Woohoo!
And so we're from the Deep South. Hence our move back here. And we met in college, actually, at a place called Samford University in Birmingham. Anybody?
Yeah.
Samford Bulldogs? Other Bulldogs? Okay, Ryan.
few.
Thank you, Ryan.
A couple.
So what was cool, just a quick aside, is that we moved to California shortly after we married, and everybody thought we went to Stanford, which we just sort of let them think that often because... No offense to Stanford, but Stanford, I think, has, rocket scientists. There's a lot of math. There's a lot of smart people. So we're like, yeah, that was the one that we went to. It wasn't, though. It was Stanford. Anyway, Birmingham. But we decided to do this adventure of life and marriage together at the end of our college career. And my dad's a pastor. He's at First Baptist Montgomery. And he performed our wedding 15 years ago, y'all, coming up. That is a miracle right there. It's 15 years. God is very sweet to let us keep doing this crazy thing together. And so we married this beautiful fall day, November 6th, 2004. And my dad, for some reason, he felt led to preach out of the end of the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 7. And that sort of section of the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus asked the crowd, what are you building your house on? Because it really, really, really matters what you found your life on.
Yeah.
Because the storms are coming. It's not if they come, but when they come to you. And so it really matters what you found your house and your life on. Okay, so if you found it on the sand, when the storms come, everything's going to fall apart. But if you have founded your life on the rock that is Jesus, you can withstand any storm.
Yeah.
And we're like, Dad, that is the most bummer message ever for a wedding. We're 22. What are you talking about? Storms and houses falling down? That's so weird. And like the love chapter would be a better option, obviously. Little did we know, of course, that we would face the great storm in our life just 3 years.
3 years later.
After that. And so in his wisdom, he was tucking this idea away in our heads and in our hearts that it really matters what you give your life to, because it will have eternal consequence. And sometimes we wait as humans till the next season, till I get out of grad school, or till we have kids, or till I get married, or till the kids leave, or whatever. And Jesus is saying, and my dad was helping impress on our hearts, don't wait to invest your life in what matters. And what matters is the church, okay? And what matters is the kingdom. And what matters is building our lives on Christ. So we went from that place of our wedding day to our adventure to California. And we didn't know anybody there, just had this crazy sort of idea that God was calling us to this new season in California. I had gotten into Pepperdine Law School, and Katherine had been doing some acting, modeling stuff in the Southeast and had gotten an agent in LA, so we thought we'd try our hand at the big city.
And whenever we talk about my modeling career, we need you to, actually, you probably have heard of me, Katherine. It's just, Giselle, Katherine. Like, I was a really big-time Los Angeles fashion model. So, I'm sure you knew me. Pre-stroke, Katherine Wolf, household name. We brought the pinnacle of my work where I was standing. Let's see, do we have it?
There's a picture up there.
Tiki Hut, Moo Moo, 25th anniversary edition online catalog. It was really something.
We're proud of you.
My work as a model in Los Angeles, when I knew for sure I have made it, this is it.
And we don't know who that stranger is holding my wife's hand in that picture. That was not me, and I would never wear that type of shirt out in public. Anyway, okay, so there's the picture up there. Now we know. Highs and lows in our early marriage, right? And so one thing we did right, of all the things we did wrong, one thing we did right is that first Sunday in LA, we went to church at a church called Bel Air Pres. And we found this group, this young marrieds community that was part of that, like a Sunday school class. And it was these couples doing life together in that city against all odds, trying to find Jesus in the mix. And we got this opportunity. It was interesting. About 2 weeks after we decided to plug our lives into that church, the leaders of the young marrieds group moved because, LA is a little flaky, the people. And so they're like, does anybody want to lead the group? And we're the good Southern volunteers. We're like, we'll lead it. And the dumb thing is that they let us lead the group. And we had been married like 6 months and we were 22. And we were real experts on marriage that particular time. But God was super sweet to allow us to be really intentional in that season when we never could have seen a storm coming, to really think about our marriage, to be disciple, to memorize scripture, to be thinking about harder issues. So God is allowing us and inviting us into this preparation for what he has prepared for us in our life, if we have eyes to see it that way. And that's what that season was about. And I'm so humbled to say we got to stay in that community for 14 years, and Katherine gave the final sermon on our last Sunday in LA just a year ago. And that community, y'all, changed our life. And our story would not be the same. We wouldn't be on this stage were it not for the body of Christ. So just a quick aside, if you don't have a church home, let me just tell you, actually you do. It's right here. Jump on in, invest your life, found it on the rock. We're here for you. This house is incredible. It will change your life. Jump in, don't wait. Stop waiting, stop church shopping. You found it. God brought you here, okay? You're welcome.
Yeah.
Come on in. Okay, so fast forward to the end of law school. We did something I would never recommend doing when you're in grad school. We had a baby. Okay, not a good idea. But God's plan, his 5-year plan, was better than ours. So we had our son James, who I think is in the audience today.
Yay, James!
On October 16th of 2007. And what is interesting is 6 months to the day, almost exactly, from when that picture was taken, we would face that storm in our life where everything would change, and where that question of what are we founded on would mean everything to us on April 21st, 2008.
Right. It was totally normal day. I felt funny, but I had felt funny for 6 months. I just had a baby. I hadn't slept. I was breastfeeding, all the things, just yuck. So of course, I'm not going to think anything weird's happening when I feel just kind of off and dizzy. And so I just decided to get on with the day and shake off these feelings. Of course, I have no reason to think that there's anything serious happening. I'm 26 years old, newly 26. I just had a baby naturally 6 months before. I have no medical history, no family history, nothing that would indicate this is anything serious. So I brush off these feelings, and around lunchtime, put baby James down for a nap. And I go into the kitchen to make a meal. And we're living in Pepperdine, married housing, so Jay comes home for about a 45-minute window in between his law school classes. Just happens to come home. So I'm in the kitchen, and I start to feel really dizzy, weird. I fall to my hands and knees. They go totally numb. I start throwing up. I'm able to call out to him who's home to call 911. He does. The paramedics come, quickly determine this is something very serious. They pack me up on the stretcher. And as I'm laying there on the stretcher, I have all these thoughts that, in way retrospect, now it's been years, are funny. They weren't funny for a long time. Now they are, because they're so hilariously where my mind was. And that's the thoughts were like, I should grab a toothbrush in case I have to stay the night. And I hope they remember to feed baby James the right cereal we're trialing if I'm not here when he wakes up. And I think maybe it's the weird burrito I ate yesterday. Yeah, that's got to be what's going on. And of course, I have no idea that I would go into a coma before those thoughts were finished, before we left the apartment. I would only wake up from the coma-like state 2 months later. So I needed a little more than a toothbrush.
Yeah.
Some major
It was a really bad burrito there, wasn't it?
Yeah.
No, just kidding. It wasn't a burrito. It was something else.
Seriously.
But as Katherine left our married housing apartment that day, was our first home that we had made as a couple. It was the place we brought our son home from the hospital. And she would never see that place again. The door would slam on that chapter of our life, as chapters sometimes end, without any closure, without any warning.
Right.
And maybe today, as we talk about this day that changed everything in our life, you're remembering the day that changed everything in your life. When you got that diagnosis or that phone call, or you lost somebody that you loved. And in the line of your history, there is another line that comes right down across it, which you can't ever go back across, right? This line of demarcation separating before and after.
Yeah.
And that day for us was April 21st, and we rushed to the hospital. I grabbed James and took him in the car down the Pacific Coast Highway following the ambulance. Didn't even know where they were going, but knew they were headed to somewhere around UCLA, and I knew it was a college. I didn't even know it had a hospital. And I remember we came around the bend, and there was this giant billboard that said UCLA Medical Center, the best hospital in the West, number 3 hospital in the country. And there was this sense as sort of my life was upending that there was this God in the midst of the chaos making order, which is what God does, right? He was making a path for us. He was taking us to a place I didn't even know what to do or where we should go, and he was leading the way for us. And again, it was Monday, about 2 p.m. Was really confused when I ran into the ER and realized there was familiar faces. And it was my church who had come ahead of me to make manifest this invisible God, to make him visible for me when the bottom was falling out of my life. And that's what that's what we get to give each other, you guys. It's probably one of the more profound callings on each of us, is when the bottom falls out, when suffering hits somebody in our community, smack in the face, or outside of our community for that matter, we get to show up in a way that is a ministry of our presence and our tears, not a ministry of our platitudes. Okay, there's time for truth. We got to know timing. And sometimes people have said well-meaning things that have been so hurtful. So we don't need to say much. Less words, we like to say, are the best words, okay? Especially in those circumstances. But my friend showed up in a way that said, you're not alone in this pain. We don't know what's going to happen, but you're not alone. And they gathered around me. We kind of walked over to the attending surgeon, Dr. Nestor Gonzalez, who just happened to be on call that day, who was double board certified and all these things, the renegade surgeon known for taking on the worst and hardest cases. And he said, I need you to know your wife likely will not survive the day. She is experiencing a massive brainstem stroke due to a very rare defect that she's had in her brain since she was born, though she probably had no warning until today. And it's called an AVM, very rare. It's so big, it's the largest I've ever seen in my career. There's 4 aneurysms on top of it. It's taking up almost half of her cerebellum. It's around her brainstem, and the bleeding is causing so much pressure, it's squeezing her brain into her spine. And this is not survivable. And I'm so sorry. And I'm sitting here holding my baby. You know, just, again, with all these dreams like we have about what our life is about to be, what it's going to be, the hopes of our future. And I'm about to get out of law school. We have this new baby, and we have all these golden dreams right in front of us. And then in a moment, they're just hanging by this thread. And that's the reality of the world that we live in, you guys. It's not safe. We need each other. We need God in the midst of it because we don't know what tomorrow is going to hold. And that day was the day when it hit me full force. That suffering happens to us all. The worst things happen to the best people sometimes. What are we going to do with that? And so my community sort of gathered around me, and the doctor said, look, I'm going to go think about it. I don't even know if we can do anything for your wife. I believe the Holy Spirit spoke to him and said, you need to give this mom a second chance. And frankly, the fact that I was a lawyer was not helping the case for why he should take it, honestly, he said. But thankfully, the Holy Spirit trumped that one, and the doctor took her into surgery to attempt to save her life. And it's going to be about 8 hours of surgery. And so we gathered in the waiting room. And as I said, I grew up in the church. My dad's a pastor, but I'm not sure I ever experienced true church until that night in that waiting room. Maybe you know what I'm talking about, because it wasn't this sense of everything going perfect. And so we give God the praise, but almost in the sense of that extravagant series, there was this sense of longing for God to show up in a way he never had before in our lives, in a way we never needed him before, and crying out desperately that, God, unless you have mercy on us, there's no way out. There's no way out of this. And so we cried out together. We laughed, though. We just shared this experience that the church gets to have, which is to show up for people, to experience this communal sense of praying against the odds that Katherine would live. And we dug into Romans 8, which was Katherine's a text she had memorized long ago and was really meaningful to her. And as you all know, some of those most profound promises that the Bible has to offer about God's love and about how he's working sovereignly over us and through us. And yet, if you've ever read those passages when your life is turning upside down, it felt a little hard to swallow that as my wife lay on an operating table dying, that God was loving her. His love wasn't far from her, that he was working out something good in that moment. Yeah. And yet I knew it couldn't just say the verse, that I was going to have to believe it and cling to it and bet my whole life and Katherine's whole life on that promise. And the sun came out that next morning on April 22nd, and the doctor came out just absolutely exhausted, looking from the from the OR, and he said he hadn't looked at the clock, but it had been 16 straight hours of microbrain surgery, and he said 2 words that we, to this day, celebrate. He said, Katherine lived, and it's kind of what we celebrate April 22nd is the Easter to the Good Friday of when she had her stroke, but we're so grateful that God spared her life for some reason. So grateful. And, he said, we don't know if she'll wake up ever, but she's alive. She might be vegetative or paralyzed. We had to remove half of her cerebellum in order to save her life. We had to do damage to her brainstem and to the nerves that give vital function, but for now, she's alive. And little did we know what we were up against, but for some reason I knew in that moment that hope had begun, this spark of hope, that he had spared her life for a reason, and we were going to fan that flame of hope as long as we can. I pray it never goes out. It's still burning today, as you can imagine. But the doctor said, look, y'all, rest. She's going to be in a medically induced coma for several days to give her brain a chance to heal. And he went to sleep and rested, I'm sure, after that, and got a page from the ICU nurse. And he rushed back up to the ICU later that night, assuming that Katherine had died. And the nurse said, oh my gosh, you won't believe it. She's trying to communicate already. She's unconscious, but she's wiggling her toes, so we know she's not paralyzed, and she's lifting up her finger, so we know she's not brain dead. And it was the first of many miracles, but as you can imagine, they don't make medically induced comas that can keep this woman from communicating to the world what needs to be said. She's like, hold on, I'm in here, don't give up. Don't give up on me just yet, please. And it was a great gift. But she would be taken to ICU where her body would learn to breathe again. And she would be put on life support for 40 days. And it was so powerful, and honestly, it didn't even strike us until later. And I pray during this time of Sabbath, maybe there is something that comes to light in your story where you said, oh my goodness, God was telling me something in the detail of my life right there, and I missed it because it was too close before. But now that I've got some time to look back and retell that story to myself, I see God. And so God allowed her to be there not 39 or 41 days, but 40 days, you guys, which is this sort of number in the Bible that just breathes that God is with us in this wilderness. He's leading us toward a promise. And just because he is silent doesn't mean he's abandoned us. And that's what he was telling us during this season.
Yeah. So like Jay said, I had what's called an AVM, which is basically malformed blood vessels that you many times are born with. So it was formed in my mother's womb when I was fearfully and wonderfully made. And these blood vessels grew and grew in this big clump. And one day they ruptured, causing the massive brainstem stroke. Now here's where it gets really interesting. So my body's pretty messed up. Like, I can't walk, I can't see well, like here's you guys and there's you guys up there, because I have double vision, and I'm nearly blind in one eye, and I'm deaf in one ear, and my face is paralyzed, and my hand doesn't work, and there's a whole lot wrong with this body. And yet, this isn't because I had a stroke. It is, but it isn't, because I wouldn't have had the surgery if I didn't. However, all of these issues are because the surgeon decided to sustain my life. Do you understand? By wounding me very deeply, my healing could happen. It's such a beautiful biblical concept that in my deep wounding, my healing could come. And in our stories, all our stories, let this be a word picture. There is wounding, but I'm here. I am like alive because he made the decision to wound me. Yeah, it's a really powerful concept. Of course, I'm sharing that years later. It's been 11 and a half years, and I can say, he wounded me greatly, and he healed me, and if you have a pulse, you have a purpose, and yay, Jesus. And when I'm waking up 2 months after this happened, I can't even understand. I've got a tube in my stomach and I can't eat. I can no longer walk. My entire life has been turned completely upside down. And honestly, I didn't even know what a stroke was. I think somebody's grandfather had one time. But by and large, I'm like, certainly a healthy 26-year-old girl could not have this kind of issue. And I don't even know people who don't eat. Like, how could I not eat now? And nothing works on my body. I couldn't see, I couldn't speak yet, nothing. And by far the worst pain of all of it was baby James. And sweet baby James is here and doing awesome, so I could tell this story. But let me warn you, I may still cry, buddy, but it's happy tears. You may be seeing a picture of my first Mother's Day. And that is a lot of pain for me because I have no memory of that day. James, for months, would be growing, and I have no memory. And then even once I do have a cognitive memory again, I was not able to care for him. And it was horrific. Absolutely. By far the worst pain was not being able to care for baby James. Every day was like Groundhog Day, where I thought today would be the day he'd get to come live with me in the hospital and stay in my bed with mommy. And I'd figure out how to modestly breastfeed and take care of him. And I didn't understand for months that I couldn't do that anymore. And finally I caught on, and it was just... it was like the stuff of your nightmares. And I like to say to the Christian community that there is a place for sadness in our stories. Everything doesn't have to be redeemed on earth. You know, I'll never get those days back with baby James. And I am screaming the joy of the Lord, absolutely. But it still stings that I didn't have that time with James. It hurts. I could have 10,000 babies, and it will never redeem the time with James. And that's okay to say out loud, in my opinion, that as Christians, we need to be about, there is a tenor of sadness, people. We're on earth. I love that Crowder song, that earth has no sorrow that heaven can't heal. Because I believe heaven is where the real healing is. That there's a lot of counterfeit, and there's a lot of redemption of our stories on earth. But there can be a sting that is lifelong, and that's okay. And why would we think it would not be that way? Like, who lied to who to say that it can't be good, and so hard and sad at the same time? That's ludicrous. It's both. Anyway, moving on. I was able to move to the group rehab. So after being deemed medically fit, which was not much, to move to the brain rehab I would live at for another year and a half. And that's where I'd really relearn to eat, and speak and walk again. And it was a very dark place. There was a lot of people not getting well, a lot of really hard stuff, hard stories. And yet I was healing in this context. It was very spiritually complicated for me. And everyone asked if I had a real low point in my ordeal and didn't want to stay on earth anymore. And I like to say that no, not really, but kind of yes, because I came dangerously close in the fall of 2008. It was right before Thanksgiving. And I knew what God had for me was to hold a big turkey leg on Thanksgiving and give God the glory, and yay, this is gonna be awesome. And of course, I take the swallow test and I fail it. So I don't swallow, and this is the 9th test that I'd taken to see if I could swallow. And I just knew, and so how can this be? And so Jay bills me back to the house we're living in, and there's this big room in this house by the facility, and he wheels me in, and keep in mind, I've just failed my 9th swallow test, I'm in the wheelchair. He proceeds to the front of this big room where his sisters who were in town and baby James, who's now 1 year old, are at like the front of this room. So I'm like watching this scene of this, like, in my mind at least, like frolicking, happy family, and I'm like in the back of the room watching. So it suddenly like dawns on me that I don't fit here. And it like lands hard. God made a mistake. This couldn't be what he intended. I'm caught between life and death. I'm not in heaven, but I'm not fully able to live, and so I'm trapped. And I don't know, this must be a mistake. God can't be here. If I were dead, Jay could remarry. James could have a normal mommy. Eventually, everyone would stop being so sad. So, ultimately, I know best here. And I'm logically thinking it through. And please insert your name right now if these are feelings you have. Because in that moment, I never know how to put words around it, but this deep sensation that I know was supernatural, of everything I've ever known and believed since receiving Christ when I was 4 years old, like kicked in. And I mean, it was like God said through the power of his word in that moment, Katherine, you are not a mistake because I don't make mistakes. I know better than you know. I'm God. You're not. All of this, yay, God. Yeah. All of this is somehow that you can't understand yet. Somehow part of what I am doing, big picture. You don't get it yet, but you will. Katherine, this is very special. You don't know, but I have chosen you for this. You will never necessarily fully grasp how I selected you. And your wheelchair that you see as like you're stuck in the chair, you're relegated to it, is this honor that I'm raising you up by sitting you down in a way that only the upside down kingdom would allow for. Jay could never replace you as a wife. James.
That's a true story, and God said that too. It's very true.
James could never have a mommy like you. Think what this will mean for his life. He gets to count it as a blessing. It will inform who he is as a person, and all of you people with all the issues that maybe on the outside, your children are better for it. It informs how they live. And the Lord was saying to me, above all else, in this just rapid fire, just scriptures, concepts, thoughts, that Ephesians 4:1, you are called to live a life worthy of the special calling that I've given to you. And that right now is to recognize this is your assignment. Don't fight this, go with it. This is the assignment I have given you on earth, and you have the opportunity to flourish within it.
And you have, my love, you have. So good.
So like,
from that moment when we got just filled up by this purpose and the sense of what God was doing, it would still be another 6 months until Katherine passed the swallow test. You know, you sometimes think like you got this vision of what God's doing in your life and then everything's going to change, because that's sort of this transactional way in which we sometimes view God, right?
yeah.
And God would continue to lead us on this journey of faith and trust. So another year until you could learn to walk a little bit with a cane, another year and a half from that moment when Katherine just felt this calling on her life, another year and a half until we get to go back home out of the hospital.
Yeah.
And I think in so many ways we think when we go through hard stuff that we've made a bargain with God, right? Like we've made a bargain that I've been through all the hard stuff, God, it wasn't great, don't want to go back there, we'll check that off our bucket list. We will move on to the vacation line items, okay? And this is a deal that we've made. And God is saying so gingerly and tenderly and lovingly that that's not how this works. And I'm inviting you into something way deeper than this sort of tit for tat. And I remember that fall after we moved back to LA, to our community, you know, we again just anticipated this straight up trajectory, and we went to see Dr. Gonzalez, who had done her surgery, and he came into the waiting room and he was crying, which is not great when your doctor's crying when he comes to tell you something about your life and your health. And this man who had become a dear friend just said, I don't know how to tell you this, but you have a separate aneurysm in your brain, separate from what caused your stroke, and it's behind your good eye. And I'm so sorry. And, in that moment, we felt kind of kicked in the gut, like, God, at least you take the brain stuff off of the table for us.
Right.
Like, we've been through so much already. And God invites us into this picture of a crossroads, and I see it in my mind right now. And really every day when I wake up, and you all too, this is the same sort of crossroads that we stand at, where God asks, what is it that you want from me in this relationship? Do you just want me to give you the good gifts that I'll give you if you say the right words or did the right things? Or do you want to know the giver of every good and perfect gift? Yeah. That's what I'm offering you, is myself, not these outcomes. You're missing the point. Do you want to just stop hurting, or do you want to know the healer of the world? Yeah. That's me. And so God, again, has invited us to this new normal, this life we never saw ourselves living. And so often we get caught up. We didn't get the miracle. People had visions. She was going to be driving, and God is like, you are the miracle. You shouldn't be here. You are the miracle. And when you try to get healing of your body, you're setting the bar too low in this moment. I'm offering you healing for your soul. That's what I want to do for you. And so God has invited us into this really beautifully bittersweet, joyful, painful, good, and hard journey with him. And friends, that is the journey he's calling us all to. And he is calling us more than that to say, I have given you something not just so you can keep it to yourself, but that you might give it away. Mm-hmm. And Paul says in 2 Corinthians 1 that we have been given comfort, not just so we can be comfortable. I mean, who doesn't want to be comfortable? It's great, especially when you've been through hard things. But God says, I've given you comfort so you can be a conduit of that comfort to other people who need it. And in the giving away of what I've given you, they will know the God of all comfort too. Yeah. And so this act of hoping it forward is what God has called us to, all of us to. And the ironic thing is that this is most profoundly done when we go back and offer the comfort we've received to the people who are experiencing the same wounding that has hurt us, right? So we can't really find our truest healing, I believe, until we go back to the place of our wounding and we're a part of somebody else's healing. So as Katherine said, the brain rehab was awful, it was painful, we hope to never go back. And God said, but I want you to go back to those places, to the people with the brain injuries and the strokes and the disability and all the places that were so painful and dark. Because when you tell them it's not the end of their story, they're going to listen to you. And they have. And so God allowed us to have this vision for the community with disabilities, which, side note, is the largest minority group in the whole world, according to the United Nations, and the most unchurched people group in the world, too. And yet there are people. These are our peers. These are our people. And so we get to be a voice for this population. And we created a thing called Hope Heals Camp 3 years ago for families with disabilities just like us to find...
Side note, like a ton of you are volunteers and campers at this thing. Some of you are here today. Some of the greatest people in the world are people who come volunteer at Hope Hills Camp. And the way I know it's your turn, but the way we knew that this camp was something really, really special is the first day I walked in the door to the cafeteria, and people had flown in from all over the country, and it was just like so overwhelming, all these disabilities, all these people, different ages, stages, and holding the door is a Passion City door holder who'd volunteered to come, and she leaned over and she said, I met you at Passion City and I'm here to hold the door for your camp. So I just, of course, started sobbing. And it was the first way I knew. I was like, I get it, Lord, this is so cool. Good. Sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
No, we thought, we wanted to give families like ours with disabilities rest and relationships and resources, spiritual resources and encouragement that this isn't the end. And we thought it was going to be a little regional thing. About an hour north of Birmingham, we go to a camp there. And it ends up, this was our third year. We just finished a few weeks ago. We had 800 participants from 35 states, plus the UK.
So crazy.
33 kinds of disabilities and ages 0 to 78. Anyway, blown our mind, and Passion has poured into this idea and this ministry and lifted it up. So thank you guys for being a part of that.
And we always try to describe, like, why is the community so deep and it's just like this electrifying energy at camp? And I have a theory that the reason why is all the mess at once. Like all the wheelchairs, all the people who are talking to themselves, and all the issues and all the ages and stages, and everybody comes together, and there's like this moment where everybody there realizes, like, we don't have the option of hiding some of our stuff. So we are going to get to come together and not try to heal each other or change each other, fix each other, but just celebrate who Jesus is in our pain. And it's electrifying. Basically, what we are doing as a community is disrupting the deep lie that a pain-free life is the only life where there is joy. Because that's ludicrous. That's so messed up, honestly. Instead, we're coming together and celebrating that life is hard and painful, but there is joy and there is good in the hard and there is hard in the good. And these people are living it and they get that. And side note, aren't we all? Are we sick of hiding and pretending we got it all together? And then so wouldn't there be freedom in churches being like that? I think this church is kind of like that. But how beautiful.
It is. What's really cool is this community has birthed a new message that we have to share. And we have a book coming out in February, and we're kind of launching it today, guys. It's not available till February, but pre-order today. It's called, drum roll please, Suffer Strong. How to survive anything by redefining everything. And here's the deal. This is a message that Passion has refined and lifted up and encouraged in our life too. So you guys have a part in this, such a huge part in it. And we're so humbled to get to share it with you guys today. We're so excited about just this next phase of ministry. God's leading us into this message that there is strength on the other side of our suffering because of who Jesus is. That there is flourishing even within the greatest limitations of our life because Jesus has overcome every constraint that there ever was.
That's right.
And so that is the hope, and we can't wait to share this with the world. And so Passion, you guys are the launching pad from it and for so many things. And so we have a special little sort of thing to invite you into today if you feel so led. And there's more at the Resource Center. But
you might know the people writing the forward on the book.
Yeah. You may know them. Their names are Louie and Shelley Giglio.
Louie and Shelley Giglio.
They can write our forward. It's so cool. And we're so humbled. Again, they've ministered to us and spoken into this message so powerfully. So we invite you into that too, humbly and with great joy, to say this is the message we get to share with the world that is on the precipice of despair. So many of us just not sure how we're going to get out of bed and do this life that we never imagined we'd have to live. And yet that's all of us. You know, the space between our expectations and our reality is the space of our suffering, really. And how do we make that be a space of flourishing? And we do it through Jesus, and we do it together.
In closing, we're going to tell you a super quick story because we're already over on time, but I just have to tell you a really just cool God story. So way back in the day, 2014, after having an aneurysm successfully removed from my brain and getting like the signing off of all my various doctors, I was deemed fit to biologically have a baby. So, summer 2015, I did. I had a baby boy named John Nestor Wolf, who's in bloom right now. So, thank you. So John is now 4 years old. And I have to tell you about his name. John, you may have heard of John. Kind of cool. It means the Lord has been gracious, and he has been so gracious. And my favorite passage of John is John 9:3, where someone asked Jesus, why was this man born blind? And Jesus says, so that the works of God might be displayed in him. And of course, that is our prayer for our John, that the works of God might be displayed in his life. And his middle name, Nestor, is for my neurosurgeon, Nestor Gonzalez. And gotta be honest, we called his office and said, does Nestor have a middle name? And they said, Raul. And we said, Nestor it is. So Nestor, you guys, in the Hebrew means seeker of miracles. You can't make this stuff up. I know, so insane. So John Nestor Wolf is just a joy. He is hardcore handful, making us nuts, making disabled mama crazy, about to die constantly. But he's just this profound gift. And honestly, he's the gospel. He's near death, new life, broken things, new things. He is what we believe, that healing and wholeness come from broken things. And yeah, it's really, really special to share that story with you. And that little guy over there in Bloom is it's a special part of this house. And so is that guy. So we're so grateful.